Okay, so we're going to talk about the history behind childbirth education and how it's got to kind of where it was, starting with Bradley Lamar's and kind of ICA, which kind of all started at around the same time. So if you think about what was happening prior to the whole childbirth education movement, there was a time where nutrition generally was pretty poor in the world, and that there were some sort of practices, especially among the middle class, the upper middle class and upper class section of the Western world, that had produced many problems when it came to childbirth. So corsets in particular, if we just think about them, and if we think about being pregnant and wearing a corset, not only do I imagine it would be incredibly uncomfortable, but it also doesn't allow baby to move into the right position that we know now babies come out sort of best in. Add that to the poor nutrition that was going on at the time, where we know, that the type of diet now that can help both baby and mum labour well and get through labour well, that wasn't the type of diet that was going on at the time. So this added to an increase in the problems around childbirth. And for some people, this was a concern. And for other people, this idea that women suffered in childbirth was part of God's plan. It's not true that every member of every church believed this, but actually there was a movement through the churches that said that women suffering in childbirth was part of God's plan for repaying some of the debt when it came to women eating the apple and getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden, right? So that women kind of deserved this, and this was their payment for kind of getting through that. And to remove some of the pain from that is to go against God's plan. So that was very prevalent for a while until it became made popular by queens and upper class people. And then feminists sort of started coming in and saying, well, how come some people are allowed pain relief in childbirth and others aren't? And so then the idea behind pain and anesthesia in childbirth got spread to everybody. So everybody then had the anesthesia, which was chloroform or ether, in childbirth at that time. So this led to the knock 'em out, drag 'em out movement. And it wasn't like the doctors were terrible, and the idea actually came from women, and it came from the fight to have choices, really. During this knock 'em out, drag 'em out kind of time, it was recognised by some doctors that it did make childbirth harder. If women were unresponsive, if they were unconscious, if they were unable to get in positions that helped, that it was harder then for the babies to be born, which of course led to forceps, the drag 'em out part of that. So there were doctors that started arguing back against these pain relief methods and saying that they were causing more complications. And also there were women who started arguing back against this. And you'll see this kind of as we go through and we talk about hypnobirthing in particular. Was a woman who was very strong, Mary Mongan, argued against this for her personal childbirth. But also there were many other women that were involved in this. There were women in Bradley and Lamar's that really pushed them through. So this all leads on to Dr. Grantley Decreed. And if you haven't heard of him before, I really recommend looking into him. His theory, he kind of galvanized the movement behind natural childbirth. It doesn't mean that if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't happen, because somebody else probably would have stepped in, but he is really credited for it. He watched women give birth without pain medication and was the one who sort of first coined this idea of fear leading to tension, which leads to pain. And you'll see that come through in the childbirth education methods that we're going to look at quite a lot. So he then made the assumption that if this is true, fear leads to tension, which leads to pain, then if women don't have fear, then they won't have pain during childbirth. And this became the idea behind the book, Natural Childbirth. So have a look at his stuff. If you haven't heard of him before, he's definitely somebody that you need to have an understanding about how he worked. But obviously there were some problems. So we're going to go on and talk about him a little bit more later on.